Hi, welcome to this episode of our Thriving Tribe, the Zoom Room sessions. I'm David Francis Moore.
I'm Juliet Harvey.
And today we are joined by Brian Sheil, music producer. Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Thank you very much, David, for having me. That's a really interesting question. And I think part of the reason that it's interesting is because sometimes because I produce artists, sometimes I wonder, am I an artist? Am I not an artist? Am I like a trajectory that helps the artist go along? I suppose I'm like a conduit to help an artist develop, obviously music, because that's what I do. So I think that's probably the best way to describe what I do. I produce music and I mix music, and sometimes I do both. So yeah, I suppose that's probably the best way to describe what I actually do. I think you go through different stages. The first, when I started doing music technology, in a way, I was 16 when I started my own internet radio station, because I thought streaming would be the way forward. I failed to realize that it was going to be music, not really in radio, but I thought streaming was a thing. But probably the first time when you go to college, David, and you can kind of really see that this is an actual career. So you start to, I don't know, take on the persona of being a producer. And then you move to a stage where you get your first number one in Ireland, and then you start really realizing that you're, geez, this is real. Like, I am a producer or an engineer or whatever, So, yeah, I think, that's when I kind of first realized that it was, and then it changes though, David. It changes to like, once you've hit a milestone, you're starting to move to the next thing, whether it's to move to a bigger music market or whatever. So that it's constantly changing and evolving. But I suppose the first time is where you're at that college stage or just before it, and you start to go, this is actual career, because before it just wasn't a thing. Music technology in Ireland wasn't really a huge thing. So. I think it's to create the perfect record, but what is that nowadays? That would be and I'm still chasing it, whether it's just purely mixing a record and the sound of it, because you're probably always constantly evaluating what you do against what's the best out there. The type of music that I produce is, a lot of it is pop music. A lot of it's like what I like to call top 40 radio music. And I've also had most of my success in Ireland has been in country music. So, I think it's just finding the hit, that's to kind of be on that line of like art versus commerce. You're constantly in the balance of, well, I need to make money out of this thing, and really the only way to make money and get a career going is to have hits, but yet you want to be integral to the artists and not just be there as the money man and just like putting out anything that you think will sell. So I think initially, to answer your question, David, was to try find the perfect sound or the perfect thing. That's really what it was. Sometimes it feels really pretentious, and sometimes it's what I do. Partly I think it's because of maybe the Irish culture, that we're not really great at selling ourselves, or worried that you'd be judged. I take a few trips to Los Angeles here and there, and it doesn't seem to be a thing. But I think the older you get though, Juliet, and the more you get successful and the more it becomes a real thing with your own studio and that kind of thing, you're very comfortable with it. But at the start, you're not really too sure what to call yourself, because as I say, it is a kind of fear of judgment, but it's also, but are you that? Are you only a producer once you're successful? That type of thing. So I'm definitely more comfortable calling myself a producer now, because it's what I do and it's what I make a living at, as well as working at visual as a technician. So yeah, it was quite weird at the start, but I'm pretty comfortable with it now. Yeah. I think it's gone back into finding perfection. I'm a perfectionist, you know. I'm pretty clinical in my work as well, and that I think has more negatives than positives, generally speaking. But the few positives that it does have, it pushes you forward to wanting more and wanting the better sounding record. To go back to that, and I think that really is it can be a disadvantage too, David, because you're kind of I'm my own worst critic, but there's sometimes you get lost in the technicality because I'm a technical head and a brain. You get lost in the technical aspect of it, and you're not really. For instance, I give you an example. I could be loving a song that I'm doing or whatever, and I'm just listening to the mix and not actually listening to the song or something. So and someone could walk into the studio and say, "Oh, I love that song," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not really too sure about it." So I think it's to get the perfect record. Like I've said before, like in many interviews, like the goal here really is to be, win Grammys. Like, I'm not like going to shy away from that really. That's what I want. But I suppose your question is kind of related to that as well. It's like, what's beyond Grammys? Like people say that to me all the time. It's only an award ceremony and everyone's great and well done and a tap on the back, But it's really my being, like I'm motivated by sound. It's a weird, but all of this stuff. I was watching the last thing you post online on YouTube, and I think Keane was talking about. You only realize this stuff when you're older. Like at the time, you're not really realizing what motivates you. Just doing it because you like it. Yeah. I think I've always had a musical ear ever since I was a kid. For instance, the first time. Again, I only realized this after the fact, but the first time that I really kind of analyzed the record was I was listening to my cousin was doing his homework. He's just home from school, and I think I was like 7 or 8, and he had a record on. It was actually Mariah Carey and Boyz II Men, that song "One Sweet Day," and the snare drum in the verse was panned meaning just coming out of the left speaker, I think it was. So I went to the back of the stereo and thought, oh, there's something broken here. Now at the time I didn't recognize what panning was. So a lot of this stuff is, I think you're born with a lot of this stuff, so I think beyond the success or the commercial success or anything like that, I think it's finding the perfect record and just living for sound in a way, because that's probably what keeps you going right to the end, Right now, collaboration is everything. I collaborate with 2 producers. One is in LA and one is in Dublin. I actually went to college with one of the guys in Dublin and thought he was really good. He was really good at EDM music. This was like 2008, and the Black Eyed Peas had just released that song "I Got a Feeling." I was like, this is where it's going. But I don't have that skill set that he has, and I tried to marry them together. So collaboration right then was, you can learn more from collaboration as well. There's barely a record produced now, David, where you see just one producer on it. It's usually 2 or 3, So yeah, and with Olivia in LA, it's the same thing, but it's the same thing, but it's different because it's America and they're listening to records differently, and so you're learning all the time. At the start, you're kind of, I suppose, you're more egocentric and you're kind of worried about collaboration in terms of, well, why can't you do it all? Like some people would say that to you as well. Well, you're a producer, why can't you do it all? And the truth is, you probably can, but it would be better by collaborating. If you could recognize someone else's talent, it would be better. So that, to go back to your question about ecosystem, David, I think that has created a type of workflow that I didn't anticipate, i.e. that there would be different projects coming in from all over the world, essentially. and you're building a network, which is very, very important. I'm sure we'll get onto networking, which is probably the most integral part of what I do. But yeah, there's more ears involved as well, David. You know, it's very hard when you're making a record. You lose perspective, I think, pretty quick. Like, particularly mixing a record, you lose maybe after 40 minutes or an hour. Well, that's for me, not everybody. And that's why I enjoy what I do in visual in terms of everything, but particularly in sound, because if you're with a band and you're doing a sound check, I keep reminding all the other guys that I work with, like, it's one take. So it's all kind of based on like gut feeling and that type of thing. So I'm in isolation in the studio, and like for 12 hours a day you're looking at a computer screen in a way, but space can play a huge role in just like how you feel in this space. Like the way I have this place designed, it's the lights aren't like on full tilt. But what I was going to say was I love working on my own a lot. So that changes between spaces, because if you're in the theatre, there's lots of people and it's a different type of environment, and it informs kind of the work that's going on the stage, you know. Yeah, it's quite difficult because there's like a kind of a golden rule in production, David, that some producers don't adhere to, and they're quite successful, but it's not really about the producer, you know, it's about the artist, and you're there to serve the artist. That was kind of the way I was brought up, if you want to put it that way. But there are a lot of producers that market themselves through records, whether it's a little ID tag throughout the thing, DJ Khaled being one, or Red One. Like, they're massive producers. And that's a kind of a really cool way of marketing themselves and their particular sound. And then we get into the whole thing of, well, if you're marketing yourself through sound, then you're into, like, are you just a one-trick pony? Are you just known for that particular thing? And that's something that I didn't want to happen. I just starting off in country music and having a successful, relatively speaking, successful kind of stab at country music in Ireland, that you didn't want to get kind of boxed into just producing country music. Hence why I started collaborating with EDM and pop producers to, you know. But I think from a general point of view, like everybody else, social media is playing a huge part in just how I market myself, and Instagram is probably where it's at nowadays. And probably most of my business comes from there, really. Word of mouth is still a key thing, because there's lots of bedroom producers on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and you hear horror stories of people going to these so-called producers, and it's just a drug dungeon they're gone into, and you know, like all these crazy, like some of the stories you couldn't even repeat here, you'd hear. But also, what I'd like to say here, David, as well, like, so one of the biggest songs last year was called Old Town Road, the Billy Ray Cyrus song. And just when we're talking about marketing and promotion, that kind of thing, that beat was made by like an 18-year-old on TikTok. So I think it was Lil Nas heard it on TikTok, this beat, and he bought it for $30. And then that became the biggest song in the world now, since they've divvied out the royalty payments and all that kind of thing. But there's an example of where probably to the extreme where marketing is going in production. Like even today or yesterday, you're kind of going, should I be online promoting like beats and that kind of thing? That seems to be where it's going. That aspect was always there, but it's really gone into the mainstream now as well. So but yeah, how I market myself, my production company is called Bright Star, just with a little bit weird spelling. The B and the S goes into Brian Sheil. All those little kind of things, keep it black and white, kind of. That's really my thing. And then, as I say, not wanting to be confined into just country music, wanting to develop into pop music and hits, David. That's the name of the game, you know. That's really, like, that's what it is. And I know I'm always like, you come up against the art versus commerce, and when people hear hits, all they hear is like just money and yeah, exactly. But it's a fine line, you know. And I think I'm like, my dad is a very successful businessman, so I the conversations we'd have, it's pure business. And yeah, I'm there going, yeah, but the snare doesn't sound great, you know. So or the artist is saying this, or they don't want this, or you know. So yeah, it can be quite difficult to kind of straddle both. But yeah. It's mostly other people's work, David, you know. Right now I am producing an EP with a guy in New York. We have several artists in Los Angeles, and I have two here in Ireland. So it's quite busy. And I think with COVID-19, it's probably one of the few businesses that is kind of protected in a way, because I'm still kind of operating in a sense. Just send me the files, and people are recording themselves in the bedroom now, and the technology has allowed for the quality of the recordings to be nearly studio level, minus the room that they're in, you know. So yeah, there's a lot of artists that we're currently working with, or that I'm currently working with. Mostly right now, because of COVID-19, David, it's all mixing work. People, if I'm not producing the record, if it was produced somewhere else, they'd go to me for it to be mixed, and I kind of love that. It's just like, send me the files and send them back, and you get notes, and then it goes to mastering and stuff like that. So, and that's something, to go back to an earlier question I wanted to kind of hash out, David, was when you were asking me about, was I an artist? Like, some people say yes, you are, because if you are mixing a record, there is significant creativity in just mixing a record. And it's all about taste and that kind of thing. So that sounds like an artist to somebody else, you know. And I think that's why people come to me for a record to be, let's say, just mixed because of how I hear music, you know. Very, very simply, David, without visual, I don't think this career will be sustainable in Ireland. So I go back to when I was 18, I got lucky. I started in visual as a technician. And I think the look is in that, David, in that it's kind of relative to what I do here. It's all technical, you know. So that's really how I have sustained it so far. Between visual and here, it's sustainable, but I'm not too sure. Like, again, I'll go back to the interview you just released about people being comfortable being broke and stuff like that. I'm not one of those people, like, you know, and that's why I kind of struggle to say that I'm an artist, because I'm not really, I don't think I'm, you know, that way of living. Some people don't like that, or they frown upon something like that when they hear that. But yeah, I'm just not, it's probably just in me from coming from a family of business and that kind of thing, you know, as like a cardinal sin or something. But it is tough in Ireland, David. That's really the thing. It's the marketplace. It's quite tough. You're going gig to gig. It's the gig economy. It's now more prevalent than ever. But yeah, I think in Ireland in particular, there's not enough respect paid to artists. That's another way you could look at it. In terms of maybe the funding and how it's divvied out, and there are some incredible artists who are, you know, providing entertainment for us all, but yet they're going home after the show broke, you know. That gets in on me, like, it's just like, this is ridiculous. And you see these artists all the time, like, you know, and they're just creating amazing work. Some of the work I may not be into it myself, you know, personally or whatever, but there's an audience for it, and people are clapping and all this kind of thing, and you're kind of thinking, this is wrong, you know. So yeah, I think a career, if I was to choose producing music only in Ireland, unless you were like full-time in country music, because that's really where, if you want to talk about the pounds, shillings and pence part of the business, that's where it's at, you know. It's the money on the door and the biscuit tin, and to have a CD at the end of the night, and, you know, the average CD costs about 14 to 15 grand to produce, and there's a business, you know. So I think that's why eventually that I need to move to a different marketplace to do this full time, because Ireland is quite small. There's that aspect of it too. Yeah, I think it could be a lovely place, and Ireland is a pretty special place to live, and you only realise these things when you go to other places. But if Ireland and the government of the day, no matter who it is, no matter what party, just arts was always just like number 10 on the list. Like, you know, even in school, it was always just like music or art, it was always just a by the by. And now, because let's say COVID, we're relying on live streaming and entertainment more than ever. So it's just like, it's needed. It's needed. I suppose it's the definition of society. Like, yes and no is probably the answer there, really. Like, I personally don't think Ireland as a country, if you wanted, does. It doesn't really promote like success, I think, the way it should. Like, I've always been of the belief that Irish people should be involved in every big business worldwide. We just have something unique about us that adds really good value to what's going on worldwide. We're kind of an interesting species or type of people, you know. Again, you only realize this when you start leaving the country and you start seeing, you know, what's going on worldwide, and you go, why are Irish people not like more successful, or, you know. But I don't want to be too harsh either, because it's like, it's a great country to live in, and but I don't know, like, my gut feeling says no, like, but then again, people are just, you know, to go back to a pure practical point of view, they're buying the artist records, and there's not a lot of people here, and it's actually a really good question. Like, the first thing I did think of there, Juliet, was a lot of what I do is like to get to the next level of something. A lot of it is gatekeeping, you know. So that's, when you think of a society, that's the first thing that I thought was, like, not a secret society or the Illuminati or anything like that, but just a kind of a closed network of business professionals, which I hope to break, because the ultimate dream here is to be the first Irish person to run a major record company. That's why I do this. That's probably to go back to your earlier question, David, about what motivates you. That 25-year plan or 20-year plan or whatever year plan it is, that's really the goal here, is to promote Ireland. Like, if no one else is doing it, I might as well try myself. And there's probably reasons why people haven't done it, because it's so hard and all the things we've listed. But yeah, society, Julia. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's a yes and a no answer. Like, as I say, I suppose what you mean by society. But yeah, I wish Ireland could promote arts better, and it's not just music. It's whatever you want. Like, arts covers so much. Like, but I'm not the only person that talks like this. Like, there's plenty of artists would say the same. But yeah, I think it's a yes and a no answer. I'm not too sure if people in the arts really like that word, entrepreneurship, first of all. And I think that could be a stumbling block to why there's not more entrepreneurship in arts, because I think when people think entrepreneurship, they just think of Richard Branson and commercialism, you know, like something like that. So I looked at the website and I was thinking the exact same thing. It's like, this is exactly maybe why other things don't work, or there's not as much entrepreneurship. But you're back to that kind of art and commerce thing. If it was framed in a different way, like, you don't. It seems as if, and I'm just talking about Ireland, that it's either one or the other. You're either going to be this artist who wants to be a pure artist, or you want to be this entrepreneur that sold out. It's hard to see it in the middle sometimes, but I think it's possible. I think it doesn't have to be either or. Like, I suppose it goes back to what is entrepreneurship, the definition of, like, taking financial risk, you know. think the main one, David, without talking about finance or whatever, is having a good family. Like, it just, because it's something that I'm lucky to have. First of all, not everyone has a really good family. It's probably just good to say that. But if you do, I wouldn't say like rely on them all the time, but like don't be a burden or whatever. But like, that's my main kind of support network. But after that, it's investing in yourself. It's continuously developing. Like, I think it was 2 years ago, I did. So you finish college and all that, and you think, right, I know everything now, and you know nothing, basically. So this whole idea of CPD, continuously professional development, I think that's something that it's a support, because you're always trying to find out more and learn more. But I went back and did I think it was a year-long diploma in strategic business management and leadership. It was so funny, like, and this probably ties back to the entrepreneurship. So I'm in a room, like, I'm a creative business thing, right? But you're in a room full of like people that work in like Tesco and Dunn's, and they're talking about stock orders and this, that, and the other, and you're kind of going, "Oh, this is the wrong place to be." But it's not actually, because it's just so, it's like what we were saying about entrepreneurship. It just relates to, we think, supermarkets or retail or that kind of hardcore business, but actually there's a lot of probably creativity in what we were learning. But like, I did very well in that course, and really enjoyed it. And so that's that's the second one, David, to have this idea that always be learning, always be curious. I suppose if you talk to anybody else who knows me, would say that when I'm talking on the phone, it's usually not just like 20 minutes. It goes on quite a long time, particularly at night time. And I think it's because the third thing, to get onto the third thing, is being curious. Like, just be curious about, like, let's say if I'm in visual and there's a dance artist comes in, and I'm just asking they're probably a stupid question, but I'm just trying to get in a sense of their world to know more about arts, because I know maybe one or two parts of arts, but art as a whole thing it's huge. So as I said, the first thing would be family, like that kind of emotional support, really. And then there's the, developing yourself, be curious. For me, professionally, David, from a very practical point of view, I try to mind my ears, because without my ears, this interview doesn't exist. That's really a thing. So that's I'm always constantly getting hearing tests and that kind of thing, and minding my ears. And there are times where you mind them too well and you're quite sensitive, and then that goes away, and your mental health feeds into how I hear. Like, I hear differently in the mornings than I do at nighttime. This is probably the first time I've said that, but I don't know what that's about. Luckily all of the concerts or gigs that I do in visual are at night as well, but it's not that I hear bad, it's more sensitive in the mornings and stuff like that. So that would be the fourth thing, about be conscious of what you have, and how you can utilize that. I'm lucky in the sense that everything is at my fingertips here, and what I do, and if I'm working in visual, everything is there, where some artists maybe don't have that luxury of, it could be a geographical thing, like their studio could be in Dublin, they're living in Carlow, and there's that commute, and your ideas are being lost, and that type of thing. So they're the general kind of supports that I put in. As I say, continuously professional development. I collaborate as well with other producers on learning, constantly be curious, ask a lot of questions. I'm addicted to watching interviews from different people around the world and who are successful, particularly in my game. And some people think that's a waste of time, because they're remembering the past pretty differently than what it was when they were kind of going up. But they're kind of the general support networks that I put in. Obviously, there's a financial thing in savings and profit and loss and that type of thing. And I've been schooled pretty well from an early age, so that kind of comes a little bit more naturally to me. But when it comes to like music equipment and buying stuff, that's a bit of a problem, there are the kind of general supports that I've put in. But I can't emphasize enough, David, to pick one, it would be family or a friend or someone just to talk to. Like this whole thing about uncertainty, like that's the one thing that I still struggle with, like is ambiguity, uncertainty, not wanting to disappoint somebody. What should I say back to this email? It's all a little bit like, I wish it was a bit more less ambiguous, really. That's really it. So yeah, the first one was my ears. Second one is spotting talent. As a kid, and even now, I am pretty addicted or obsessed, but really intrigued with the A&R process of finding artists and spotting the unique sound or the next big thing or that type of thing. Even as a kid, like, I used to watch X Factor, and you'd watch Simon Cowell there, and people don't like him. And I remember I was maybe a teenager, right? So you're kind of going, why does everyone hate him? And you're kind of going, well, that's because he's no talent, Brian, right? And you're kind of going, okay. But yeah, he's on the telly and everyone's watching him, and he's employing 500 to 600 people a week. So surely there's something there, So yeah, that would be the second thing, David, spotting talent. Like, a lot of the artists that I work with are all artists that I found as well. Like, and it's like, can we collaborate? A lot of it is maybe like 40, 50% of it's that, and the other 50% is people coming to you, You get to, going back to about 3 questions ago, here's another one. You get to a point where you don't want to be choosy in who you work with, but yet you want to maintain your professional standards, That's a tricky thing. I'm answering that 3 questions ago. What else? Spotting talent, hearing ears, networking. Networking has been everything to me, David. I can't stress enough how much networking has really helped me. I am notorious for contacting people all of the time. Like, I just kind of don't take no for an answer, and that's the more business thing coming out in you, but yet you have to be quite, respectful and all these kind of things. But 2 instances where networking has got me, just to, I might explain to you. One is, so I wanted to meet Simon Cowell, basically, right? So because I was just so obsessed with, like, what's going on here, like, and like, I know talking about X Factor and all these type of things is like the devil in arts. It's very interesting. Like, I think I'm in both worlds. I'm kind of going, why is that? And then yeah. So basically, emailed his managing director about 50 times, and we had a meeting, and I didn't get to meet Simon, but I got to meet his managing director. It was the worst meeting of my life. It was just terrible, right? I'm not going to break any confidences, but like, it was just the worst meeting ever. But a great experience in the business world, the business of music, right? There was no creativity, arts, nothing. It was pure, if you want to go like that, pure business, entrepreneurship, where are the hits, where are the numbers, where are the analytics, all this type of thing. So that was one thing. That was like, I kind of bit off more than I could chew. But it got me in the room, by just hammering away. And the second kind of thing where networking really proved really well was, I was doing, so there's an artist who was signed to RCA Records called Grace. Her big song was You Don't Own Me, the Leslie Gore classic. So I did all of her showcases for all the record companies. So I think it was in 2014, I was in America for like 6 weeks and just going around doing all of her showcases, playing the piano. But anyway, fast forward. So you get to meet all these executives and that type of thing. Not really creative people. Again, I'll go back to probably the whole thing. There's a difference between a music executive and a music man. But anyway. So one of the showcases was with a producer called David Foster, who is one of my idols and that kind of thing. So you're like, pretty nervous playing piano in front of him, this, that, and the other. But I get to the end of the story. It's quite a long story. But as I was playing piano for Grace at the showcase, so I'm in Santa Monica at Universal playing piano, and I look up and I'm just playing it all most of them. I didn't write down chords or anything like that because you're doing it so much. But his email address was written on the piano stand. So I kind of, in that moment, took a decision: will I remember his email address, or will I mess up the song? Right? So I chose, I remember his email address, because I was like, she's not going to get signed here. I just know she's not going to get signed here. Now, funny thing about muscle memory, David, I learned is the song didn't get messed up. My hands just started doing things. I'm like, that's weird. So muscle memory is the thing, right? Remembered his email address. It was in my last year in college. Emailed him, got an email back 6 weeks after I emailed him. Says, I want to do a Skype interview, literally what we're doing. So he did a Skype interview with me. Like, this guy's 19 Grammys. I had a project on my thesis. It was called Blasting the Popular Past, where I pretended to be him back in 1980, producing when he used them. So it was like a whole thing. That was probably the biggest experience of networking that I've had. And his assistant is Olivia, who I collaborate with now. So networking is just everything. You know, networking, if you can get networking really, really good, concentrate on your talent, and, you know, be a nice person, I think things might work out. But yeah, that's they're the four things that networking being huge. Yeah. Every single one. The one that really stands out was ambiguity and how to deal with uncertainty. Like that, if somebody can master that, like just tell me, like, you know. But that, yeah, that's really interesting, Julie, what you said. Yeah, I'm really thinking what you said there about valuing others and spotting talent. Like, there's another huge one that, like, I think I'm pretty decent at. But that's very interesting. That I wouldn't have thought of that as entrepreneurship, you know, because I, like, in my head, well, yeah, I can only speak for me, but like, you think of like just big business and entrepreneurs, and they're always interviewed on the Late Late Show, and it's always a big business, but the interviewer rarely asks about creativity and ideas, and maybe the more I suppose you're like, how creative are you allowed to be in, let's say, a boardroom, for instance, you know, when people are looking at the bottom line and gross profit and that type of thing. So that is very interesting what you said about language and what it means to different people when they hear certain things. Like, I'm just thinking of, let's say, local theatre schools, whether it's dance schools or pure kind of like play groups or whatever. Yeah, there's a lot of all of those competencies as you described relates to, but it's very interesting. I'm just going a million miles an hour here in my head thinking of everything you said. But yeah, the one that I really heard quite well there was spotting talent and dealing with uncertainty and ambiguity. I don't think I do, David. You get lost in the music, and it's pretty hard to start. Like, when I started having my own small studio and the bigger studio now, you start to think to yourself, am I marketing myself as a producer, or am I marketing myself as a studio? So to start, you go, no, it's a studio, and it's, you know, €30 per hour, and that doesn't work like in creativity. You learn that pretty quick. So how do I value my time? Like, I don't charge per hour because, first of all, I don't want that pressure, and I don't want to put that pressure on the artist either. So again, we're back into this art versus commerce. It's not like if you're working for, let's say, a retail company, you're on a per hour thing, you clock in, you clock out, and that's it. It's quite different when you're creating, as you know, as everyone knows. So I play a lot of tennis, actually, is one way to just get out the frustration that you have creatively. So I don't do it as often as I used to do it because you get so busy. The weather in Ireland is not great a lot of the time. But yeah, I used to swim loads, and then you get loads of ear infections, and then you're like, well, I can't do that anymore. And, you know, so there is that. And just, yeah, how do I value my time? I don't really... I do and I don't, like, but I put most of my time or here into what I'm actually doing. Like, maybe I value in that way, like that when I'm producing a record or mixing a record, that I'm here for the artist during that period, you know. But I also take time out to I wouldn't call it meditation. I find that pretty difficult. But just time out to... So basically, the way I have the room set up is that the studio is that end, and then when I was designing this in my head, I had that I wanted this half of the studio to be like a sanctuary, you know, like a Zen space, and that's where the artists and that record and the mics are set up and that type of thing. But I suppose I just chill out and actually listen to music. Nobody listens to music anymore. Like, how often are people on Spotify, let's say? They're not even listening to the track. It's the next after like 2 minutes, you know? People are just hearing stuff. They're not actually listening to it. So that's how my point being that I value my time, and that I kind of like put time into myself just to listen to stuff and get better and get really angry and all those type of things about why my records don't sound as good as Max Martin's records or whatever, you know. Yeah, there's all of that. But that's a difficult one, David. Like, how do you value your time? It's quite difficult. You could do it per hour, and you know, it's just like, I don't mind. I'm not afraid of work. I'm not afraid of work. That's not afraid of long hours. I mean, if you are, it's the wrong business to be in. Like, but. You probably would. Like, you wake up, and the first thing, as we all do, is check our phones, and you're straight away into replying. Like, and you're like, why am I? No, I need to get up and brush my teeth. Like, why am I doing this? Like, you know. And it's kind of funny that a lot of it doesn't need to be replied to there and then, and a lot of it doesn't need to be replied to at all. But yeah, I probably would value myself more, David. I do kind of fantasize about the time that you would be like running this thing, and you'd have like a team working with you, and you know, whether you'd be always like not prejudging them, but like, okay, I'm paying someone to reply to emails. I did that myself and did this. You know, you'd be kind of going to that kind of mentality. But yeah, you probably would. I think you probably would. There are days where there's no admin work, and then there are days where it's just like flooded, and it's all, as Juliet was saying, that I'm in the digital domain a lot of the time, so it's all like files, and it's huge files every time. Like, each song could be like between 4 to 10 gigabytes, and it's all data, and you're mining their data, and it's all of that kind of stuff as well. And you need a really good internet connection. And but yes, to answer your question simply without rambling, is yeah, you probably would. You probably would value yourself or your time a little bit more if you were being paid for it. But unfortunately, I'm not yet. So I'm going to speak a little bit about my experience, and then going into the real world, and then I'll answer your question. I just think it's good to preface it by saying, like, there's not an awful lot of real world, as we probably all know, in college. So that's the first thing to say. I think I recognized pretty early at the start that if I wanted to do this, that I would have to be in a real setting pretty quickly, hence why I was so adamant to work in visual, right? So I was kind of, I suppose you are practicing what you're learning, you know, and getting paid for it. It's like the dream, you know, in a way. And at that point, I was pretty good. Obviously, I've gotten better, as we all do. It's you do things 50 more times, you get better at it. Like, I know colleges have guest lectures and this, that, and it's good, but there's maybe not enough emphasis on the real world in that sense. Again, from my own experience, because I can only talk about that, is a lot of people in higher education for, let's say, the arts or the creativity sectors, not an awful lot of them, I think a lot of them think it's something different than what it actually is or something. There's a bit of that. Yeah, I think they should really concentrate on more real world application of skills than really doing that essay back in 1920 about music production techniques isn't as important as studying, I don't know, if you're into pop music, how Max Martin achieves that sound, or how Serbian Genia achieves this particular sound on this record that nobody in Ireland can. You know, because that's a fact. Like, you know, it's just a thing. If you listen to any of the, I'll go back to stuff I'm interested in. It's not like I'm selling out here, but it's just, if you listen to any of those type of records, you know, there are certain things within those records that are very hard to achieve, and they sound really good. So I think maybe a bit more emphasis on studying success. A really huge thing that isn't focused on, Julia, in higher education, I think, is the business aspect, is the entrepreneurship of what you're doing. Not awful lot of people talk about, like, you're going to be broke at the start, so, like, you know, prepare for that, or have a plan, or just don't go in the door, like, because it's the easy way out, or because then you'll feel bad, and there's all these internal feelings start happening, then your creativity is dying, and then you're probably depressed, and that, you know, it starts off this trajectory wrongly. So yeah, like, I used to think college had me well prepared, but the more I learn and the more I listen to people and the more I just ask more questions as I do, and maybe just see, like, from my own experience, how many people, I think there was maybe 30 people started off, and it was maybe like 10 graduated, and there's only one, maybe two, that are actually doing it, you know? So I'm not an expert in statistics, but that's not a good statistic, you know? Now, do you see that all the time, these type of things? Yes, but again, I go back to that thing about people are in these courses, and they're, not that they shouldn't be, but I don't think they really realize what it's about, you know? And I know colleges and higher education have to have their numbers, and they're selling it in the fancy brochures and the prospectus and all those type of things. But again, you could ask, Juliet, why did you bother going to college, and why didn't you? Because there is this idea of, like, well, why didn't you just save? Just go to Tesco and save money and go look at YouTube tutorials and have hits, you know? There is that aspect of it too, and I'm talking to just myself, but you can apply that to painting, to sculpting, to whatever. Why don't you just do it? Like, just do it. Yeah, there's, you could say that, but the one thing about higher education that I really, really enjoyed is I think you what's the best way to say this? Like, you're faster at things. Like, you're learning things you don't really realize you're learning about, like essay writing and this type of how to write an email, you know, all these other type of things that you need as a professional, because you are a brand. Let's get into that, you know. So I don't regret going to college, or I don't regret that I did well and finished top of the year, and I just, like, was just night and day work, staying up till 3 or 4 in the morning, was in hospital twice, was just obsessed about getting, like, the best. And it's pretty wrong when you really look back at it, like, it was kind of stupid, but just, again, this obsession of, like, perfection and being the best and that type of thing. But yeah, I think higher education does struggle. It absolutely does struggle. And it doesn't need to, like, it doesn't need to at all. I think it's probably getting better. Like, I was in college between 2008 to 2011 or 12. So loath to admit it's kind of a while ago, like, but it's probably gotten better. Like, were the likes of these things ever happened back then? You know, it's like a real conversation, and open up, frank conversation about entrepreneurship and arts and the relationship between both and that type of thing. So.
This has been our Thriving Thrive Zoom sessions, and this has been Brian Sheil. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, David.
Do you have any handle, website, anything you'd like to throw out so people can check in with you and your work and follow you, whatever?
Yeah, you can check me out on all of the socials, as I say nowadays. Brian Sheil, BrianSheil, or briansheilmusic.com is where you'll find all of the information.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Brian.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.